Today, I guess data drives the baseball world. If you look around, everything's sabermetric, StatCast, even in the telecast of the games now, we're getting all sorts of information that comes through, and that's pretty good as long as you know how to deliver it. But it becomes a little useless if there's data without any delivery, and obviously delivery without the data is useless. And what do we mean by that? So today, that's what I want to talk about. I'm going to lay out exactly how to use feel to deliver the data in a way that's specific to your individual. Okay, so I guess the best place to start, I recall when, oh boy, so this is give you an idea of how old I am. So a little bit over 20 years ago, when my oldest daughter was very young, at her grandparents, there was a small stand of pine trees in the backyard, and my Britty would climb those trees. And you know what was interesting, and the reason I'm telling you this story is, a lot of times young kids, they'll always ask why. And to Vinny LaFraza out there, who always comes in and asks me why, which I always joke about, I always think that's just a wonderful question. And why. But it's interesting how adults always seem to ask how. And unlike kids, adults, I think we are more conditioned to ask the how. It's as though we don't trust ourselves, we don't trust our instincts. And in the process, we have no process. So we're constantly at the mercy of someone else's ideas or opinions or comments or instructions. And it's interesting because getting back to Britty, there was a process, and the whole idea of mechanics seems, if you watch a kid play, you're going to see them problem solve. And I think at the end of the day, I think that's what mechanics really are. It's problem solving. It's your brain and your body teaming up to solve a movement pattern. So, anyhow, Brittany was there was a point in time when we walked out the back deck, and Brittany was halfway up the pine tree, and it was very interesting. And uh, my her gram, my mom was was afraid she was going to get hurt, so it was interesting. And no one had ever told her that she couldn't climb that tree, and therefore, she learned how to do it. And she wasn't she didn't care, she wasn't embarrassed to try it, whatever. Anyhow, it's pretty crazy to think that a 3-year old had no fear. And I guess you could probably say she had excellent mechanics, excellent tree climbing mechanics. So she's her best tree climbing coach that there is. And she has a higher confidence in climbing trees. So her instincts and her abilities to adapt, just by doing it herself. Okay, so she never asked anybody, never asked her gram, never asked her pap, never asked her mom, never asked me, the neighbor, anybody to help her, um, to figure out how to climb it. And basically, the only thing that she would say would be, "Hey, watch, watch me do this." So, so the depth of her practice, she just stayed with it, kept at it after each failed attempt. As she's figuring it out, trying to problem solve it, the depth of her practice was so much deeper. It was more concentrated because she was trying to figure something out: where to put a hand, where to put a foot, what to hold, where to pull. And based on her ability to gather that information, she figured it out pretty quickly how to climb that tree. Now we won't go into uh, her escapades with Brooke the neighbor, and and the other neighborhood girls. So those poor pine trees. Anyhow, and so when it comes to the quality of your practice and development, a lot of times it's your ability to gather the information from your body, you apply it, and that's going to define the depth of your practice. But if you're always asking how, you're going to struggle to do that. So, the idea of going out in that backyard and throwing baseballs, I don't know if that's a foregone conclusion, if those days are gone or not. But I'm often fond of saying I'm really not hip on things that are organized for kids under the age of 10. And I know that ruffles some feathers, but you know, we've gotten away from free play, play without, just the kids playing on their own, learning, experiencing, experimenting, without being told what to do. And I think it's made a vast it's made its vast presence felt through the lack of feel, and I guess that's where we want to get to now. So let's start with the idea of what feel is, and to begin with, as I get over here, it's going to start with the idea of of focus. And what I want to begin, as I start here, is feel is more of a method. It's not the actual teach. Um, It could be. I mean, it could be touch. The actual physical sensation. Can I feel a stretch across my ribs, across that lower back, across the hip sling? It could be awareness. Um, how a particular pitcher throws a curveball or a change or a fastball. He's got a good feel for it, and it could be emotional. How does he or she feel about himself? Um, do they feel good about it? So, you know, about the experience, about that day's outing, whatever it is. So, in other words, that idea of feel, it can have a lot of different meanings. And thank you to Lance Wheeler for setting us up on this path, and that idea that it's not just one thing; it involves a number of items. So I guess to develop good mechanics, all three of these concepts have a play into that development, and develop the mechanic, become your own coach, increase confidence levels. So those are the three areas that I want to integrate when I'm working with feel. So connect the body to the brain. So they're both interrelated. So without the brain, we couldn't move, and without a body, we couldn't think. So the three-step process, that through the nervous system when developing a motor program. Feel is a native language, and it's the sensation originating from the body, which are sent to the brain. We do the basketball example in the building where we shoot basketballs, and I'm just asking questions, about feel and what are the sensations that are drawn back in, eyes and hearing and the touch of the ball coming off the hand, and so that's all raw input that gets sent to the brain, and then after receiving that information, the brain is forced to make a decision. Is that input a threat? If we remember, the number one priority for the body is self-preservation. So it wants to know, is the input a threat, or is it safe to move forward? And after it says that, the brain will send out uh, the motor program or the directions on what it wants to do next. So the truth is, we're really like an Apple operating system or a Android operating system, more so. I guess we're more software than we are hardware. So, you know, uh, developing the software brings home the hardware. So, the second area then would be awareness. It's a process of self exploration. It's a process of guidance. Yesterday, talked about throwing rocks and bottles, and how we would make adjustments to that. So, um, it's a process where by we're going to attach a positive or a negative movement to shorten the learning curve. So I'm a big believer that if you have no chance of feeling what's right, you're probably not going to feel what's wrong. And I'm more interested in understanding what's right because that's what I want to repeat. So contrasts will play a very important role in this idea of feel. Okay, within that methodology of feel. So until a player can feel what you're asking him to do, he's not going to understand it. So I don't want to be asking questions, and I am the biggest offender of this. And I say this all, and I try not to be. A lot of times I have to catch myself, but I'll ask a pitcher if they're feeling something in particular, and then I'll ask them the area. And I probably shouldn't be doing that. I want to draw that from the player himself or herself. And I think a good coach becomes a questionnaire more than anything. He's asking questions. He's trying to get that feedback drawn out. So, again, so if a player doesn't can't feel it, he's probably not going to understand it. And then that final um, area there was that idea of feeling good, of increased confidence, and it's that emotional aspect. And I want the players to feel good about themselves. So an increased level of confidence, knowing that it's 100% possible, and you don't have to rely on external sources or opinions. And boy, this goes back to the question from the other day. I really am going to delve into that whole idea of fear and failure. Um, so that's coming up. We're going to add that in there because that's just amazing. So, what I want to do is I want to instill in them it's okay to fail. The reason it's okay to fail is because there's a lesson to be learned. If I never learn the lesson, then I'll be doomed to repeat the same thing over and over and over again, and that would be the true failure. So if I understand what I learned that lesson, just like Brittany trying to figure out how to climb that tree, I will create a depth in my training. I will progress. So once they understand that process and begin to trust it, that's when we see confidence starting to build. That's when it begins to take off. So most often, confidence is going to arise from knowing that what you're doing and trusting in your abilities, that you can make the changes on your own. Being in the zone. Okay, a lot of people would say it's being in the zone, and it doesn't matter if we fail because we know that the next pitch we can get it right back. So, and once that happens, I don't think a player is afraid to stray. I don't think they're afraid to try new things. And at that point, there's a deeper level of self exploration, and one begins the other. So, activity creates clarity, action creates clarity. So, without that, uh, we're going to be a little bit miserable. So, here we go. So, feel it as the method, not to teach. Feel it's focus. So what are you trying to do? If you don't like the results you're getting, change the instructions to your body. So we are to, as coaches, we want to monitor outputs and change the inputs. Okay, so understand what's going on. So the next item, E, we could think of it as experience. How are you going to try and accomplish this? What have you done before? What did that feel like? So it's through experience that we learn what to expect. So allow your pitcher to choose his options of how to do it. Don't cookie cutter him. Okay, we do that all the time, and we talk about programs that don't do this, and yet everything's still the same. We have to be in this position. Uh, all of a sudden, here comes the video, and everything becomes this orchestrated dance of someone else's choreography. So, with experiences will come expectations, and with expectations, experiences never become. So, getting very philosophical there today. Sorry, guys, it's Friday. So, eliminate. So we're going to get our feedback. We're going to determine, the player's going to determine what worked and what didn't work, that whole process of trial and error. But within that, there's a focus and different experiences, not necessarily a system. What am I trying to get done on this particular pitch? Is it about throwing a ball through the wall? Is it about hitting a particular target at a higher velocity? Is it about feeling my front foot get solid into the ground? Is it about having a stabilized back foot? Is it about making the move? Is it about riding the slide? Um, any of these things. Is it about getting a good shoulder rotation through the throw? Uh, Forward shoulder extension through the throw. It could be a number of things. So on any particular pitch, there could be a different intent. So just be aware of that. So it's not always about throwing as hard as I can, throwing strikes. Okay. And then finally, we would want to talk about that L in the field, and that's learning it. Let the player put it into his own words. Have him repeat it back to you. What is it? Because we want to speak their language. They don't need to learn our language. We have to learn their language. We have to meet them where they understand it. And I think that makes it a little clearer. And if I can keep a clear focus, eliminate expectations, and invite the new experiences, I think the player starts to learn by eliminating moves they don't want. They're going to learn what works best for them, and that's what stays. Again, we talk about awareness being very inclusive, not exclusive. Uh, Excuse me, the other way around. Awareness being very exclusive and not inclusive. It wants to eliminate what doesn't work, and it wants to lock in on what does work, and that is what true awareness is. So, you know, so within this as a coach, the key here of the field method is in your ability to ask questions. Hold your players responsible and accountable through questions, and the questions also let the player know that their opinions matter. Give them a say. It's their deal. They're making the pitches. They're on the hill, so they have to be the ones that are most vested in this. So focus the mind and direct the attention. And I think when you do it correctly, there's a process of self exploration and finding solutions that matter the most. So I think that's where we want to get to. I talked about promote failure again because that's um, within that whole realm of learning, getting the lesson. So Thomas Edison's, I never looked at it as 10,000 failures. I looked at it as 10,000 ways not to make the light bulb. Okay, so we want to be a good listener. We want that player to feel safe in what he's doing. So if not, he's probably just going to stay locked into what he already knows. Encourage them to keep a journal. Encourage them to put the results, whether they're good results or bad results, let them establish their own cueing systems. So again, it's not our bodies. Promote paying attention and feeling movement. Let them tell you what they feel and where it was, and the movement. So, and I think that's probably the most important parts that we can talk about today.